Today's daf is daf Pei Tes. We'll start with the mission on daf Pei Chesam and Beis on the bottom of the Amud. And there's an introduction here in the Masechet. We'll try to highlight some of the points of the introduction to put this Mishnah in perspective. And a woman received a get. Now she wants to claim her ksuba. And there are two shtaros, there are two rayos that she could bring in order to collect her ksuba. Number one, she produces a get, and the assumption is that once she receives the get and she's in isgarsha, now she can collect her ksuba. In addition, she produces a ksuba, and that's a proof that the ksuba was not paid up, because in general, once you write a ksuba, then with the payment of the ksuba, the Baal receives the ksuba back from the Isha. Now, in most places, the minhag was to write a ksuba, write a shtar ksuba, and that would be a proof that since she's holding on to the ksuba basically testifies that she has not been paid up the ksuba. However, there are places where the minhag was not to write a ksuba, and all she needs is to bring two witnesses that she received a get from her husband. And then in those places where they don't write a ksuba, they rely on Tanai Bezdin. And that means that a woman can collect her ksuba, one of Masayim, based on the fact that she's divorced. That itself means that she has rights to collect the ksuba. And even though she doesn't have a ksuba in her hands, she has a get in her hands. But we're going to learn a sugya here based on the Mishnah about different opinions as to when we can rely on her proofs to collect her, to allow her to collect her ksuba. Is it enough that she has Eidei Gerushin, and that establishes that she received a get from her husband, and then she can collect her ksuba based on Tanai Bezdin, even in the absence of a shtar? And there'll be another opinion where she has to produce the get in Bezdin, and it's not just sufficient that she brings two witnesses to testify that she received the get. She has to bring the get to the Bezdin. And again, we're going to have another possibility of her collecting the ksuba based on the fact that she's holding on to the shtar ksuba. And then we'll have to discuss the question as to whether or not she has to return the ksuba to the husband, or in the case where she proves her gerushin based on the get, and now she comes to collect the ksuba, she has to return the get in order to receive the payment of the ksuba. So let's go on with the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that when a woman is divorced and she comes now to Bezdin to collect her ksuba, hotzia get the enima ksuba. In the first case, she produces a get that testifies to the fact that since she's holding on to the get, it must have come to her by virtue of the fact that her husband gave her the get. And now with the gerushin, she's claiming the ksuba. And the get is certainly proof that she was divorced. And even though she doesn't have, together with the get, a ksuba, nevertheless, she could claim that she lost the shtar ksuba. So when the Baal claims, I paid you already the ksuba, and you returned to me the shtar ksuba, and I ripped it up, and that's why you don't have a ksuba in your hand. The halacha is, and this is how the Mishnah rules here on the top of Peites, gova ksubasa. Nevertheless, despite the fact that he claims that he paid up the ksuba, he got back the ksuba and ripped it up, and that's why she doesn't have it in her hands. Nevertheless, she can collect the ksuba. And this is based on a sheet of Rabbi Yochanan that we'll learn in the sugya called Hatoin Achar Ma'aseh Bezdin Lo Omar Klum, which means that if he claims that he paid up the ksuba, then surely Bezdin would have, in order to supervise and prove and offer him a hochacha right that he paid up the ksuba, they would rip up the get. And therefore, the very fact that she is holding on to the get is a sufficient proof that not only was she nisgarsha, but that her ksuba was not paid up, because in event that he had claimed payment, he would have to have gone to Bezdin, and then Bezdin would have had to take the shtar get out of the hands of the Isha. The very fact that she's holding on to the get means that number one, she was niskash, number two, the ksuba was not paid up. So that's the case of a woman who comes to Bezdin with a get in her hand without a ksuba. Now we have the opposite case. Ksuba v'edi get. She comes to Bezdin to collect her ksuba, and she has no proof of gerushin. She's holding on to the ksuba, but who says that she was divorced? The Baal, in fact, claims that you know why she doesn't have a get in her hands is because he paid up the ksuba in Bezdin. Bezdin therefore took the get out of her hands. Hiomeres, her counter argument is that Avad Giti. She claims that she lost the get. And she really had the get in her possession because she never collected ksuba. Bezdin therefore never took the get out of her hands. And what supports her claim? Keep in mind that the Baal here, by saying that he was poreh the ksuba, he's admitting that she was divorced. So even in the absence of a get in her hands, we believe she was divorced. As far as his claim that he paid up, she has a counterclaim that the reason why she doesn't have a ksuba is because she lost the ksuba. It wasn't that Bezdin took the ksuba from her possession and ripped it up. Just 1 second. Did I say ksuba? I'm sorry. If I did, I stand corrected. I'm sorry. She's claiming that, right? His claim is, where's your get? If you don't have a get, it's proof positive that I paid you the ksuba and Bezdin took the get and ripped it up. She's claiming she lost the get. She had the get and she lost it. Hiomeres Avad Giti. So again, there's no debate. Everybody agrees, the Baal and the Isha, unanimously that she was divorced. Now we have a Dinu Dvarim. He claims he paid up the ksuba, and that's why she doesn't have the get. She claims that she never got the ksuba, and therefore she and why doesn't she have the get in her possession? Because she lost the get. And now we're going to ask the Baal the following question: if indeed, as you claim, you paid up the ksuba, then why is she holding on to the ksuba? Bezdin would certainly have been afraid that she might take this ksuba and collect it in another Bezdin, and therefore Bezdin in this case would certainly offer the Baal what's called a shovar, a document in his hands that would prove that he paid up, and that's called a proof of payment. So now we're turning to the Baal and we're saying to the Baal, if your claim is correct and you paid up the ksuba, where's your shovar? But who omer avad shovri? I lost my shovar. And the Gemaras will soon see is going to derive from this Mishnah that kosvin shovar, that a Baal, when he pays up the ksuba, he can only protect his claim against her counterclaim that she didn't get the ksuba and she's holding on to the ksuba only if he has a shovar. And his responsibility will be to hold on to that shovar, guard it in safekeeping to make sure that he doesn't lose it, because otherwise she'll be able to collect her ksuba. Now, obviously, the Mishnah is crystal clear about one thing. If she doesn't have neither a get nor a ksuba, then she has no leg to stand on. Her claim is based on the fact that she's holding on to the ksuba. And when he counters and he says he paid up the ksuba, then we'll ask him, why is the ksuba in the hands of your wife? So the fact that she doesn't have a get in her hands is a little bit of a support to his claim that Bezdin ripped up the shtar get because they didn't want her to have proof that she didn't get the ksuba. But that's not enough for claim because she counters and says she lost the ksuba. Now we're turning to the Baal and we're asking him, why is it that she is holding on to the ksuba? And if the Baal indeed, as he claims, paid up the ksuba, he would have demanded of Bezdin to write him a shovar. And that shover, by the way, is an important tool for the Yarshim as well. For example, after he dies, and her Yarshim are going to claim that they want to collect the ksuba from his Yarshim, and there's testimony that he died, then how will his Yarshim be able to counter the Yarshim of the Isha and say that you received the ksuba, you collected the ksuba, unless he has a shover? And if he doesn't have a shover and he didn't pass on the shover to his Yarshim, they're going to have to claim they lost the shover. Okay. V'chein, now the Mishnah makes an analogy to a Baal Chov. The Malva is claiming his Chov, Hotzi Shtar Chov. He has in his possession a Shtar Chov. The problem is that this Shtar Chov is dated before Shvius, and now he's coming to claim his Chov after Shvius, and Shvius is Mishametes, unless there's a Prusbul. And Einimo Prusbul, he's not holding on to a Shtar Prusbul. He's claiming that he had a Shtar Prusbul in his possession and he lost it. The Lov, on the other hand, said this claim counters that there was never a Shtar Prusbul, and the Shemitah is Mishamit Chov. So in this case, the Baal is not believed because we're afraid that maybe there was never a Prusbul written on this Chov, and Shvius is Mishamit Chov. And therefore, Hare Elu, in both of these cases mentioned in the Sefer of the Mishnah, number one, the case of the Isha, number two, the case of the Baal Chov, Lo Yifru, there will be no possibility of Piron, because we're always going to be afraid that maybe the Chov was already paid up. And that's the sheet of the Tanakama. Based on the fact that he's believed to say that he once had a shover in his possession, he lost it. She is not believed because she's not holding on to the get. And the Baal Chov is not believed, and the Lov is not believed to say that there was never a Prusbul because the Baal Chov is believed to say he had a Prusbul and he lost it. That's how I understand the words Hare Elu Lo Yifra'u. I would love if you would check your commentary to see if he says the same thing on the words Hare Elu Lo Yifra'u. You have a possibility of reading that to me, Rabbi? But you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay. On Hare Elu Lo Yipara'u, Anu Chosheshin Shema Ha'isha Gavta Kvar Kedubata Al-Yedei Haget. ובדין קראו את הגט, לפיכך היא אינה יכולה להוציאו. וכן לגבי החוב.
What we're saying is there's like a raise on both sides. Her raise is where's he get? And that seems to indicate that there was already a piron of the ksuba and Bezdin ripped up the get. On the other hand, there's a raise on his side, because if indeed, as he claims, he paid up the ksuba, why is it that he's not holding on to the shover? And now we're going to believe him, I guess because Hamotzi with Aver of Haraya, like we balanced one race against the other, and we believe him to say that he lost the shover. Right? She's not believed to say she lost the get. And in the case of the Mal of the Lova, when the Mal wants to claim from the Lova, and the Lova is saying that what? That there was never a Prusbul, the Lov is believed because of the Reisa on the part of the Malva. Why is it that he doesn't have the Prusbul in his hand, and we're not going to accept his claim that he lost the Prusbul in order to allow him to collect the Chov from the Lov? So again, if I understand correctly, although neither my commentary nor yours mentions the principle of Hamotzi Michel of Haraya, I think that's the operating principle here, the underlying logic here, because they both have a Reisa. There's a minus on each side. Now we get to Rav Shimon Gamliel. He disagrees. Omer minasakana v'elech. And we're going to assume later on at the end of our sugya for today, we're going to see that the entire Mishnah was really authored by Reb Shimon Gamliel. But right now, the Gemara is of the assumption that Reb Shimon Gamliel is a dissenting view. And he's saying that min hasakana v'elef, in other words, you're basing yourself on a reisa that the woman should have been holding on to the get, but after sakana v'elef, when the Goyim had a gzera that enjoined the Jewish people from fulfilling mitzvahs, the women were afraid to hold on to their get, and the Balei Chovos to their prusbul, because if they get caught by the government, they'll be put to death. It's almost like a religious service to have a get or to have a prusbul. So the fact that she's not holding on to the get might be simply because of the sakana, so there's no raise. So once we remove our raise, and there's a raise on his part, because why isn't he holding on to a shovar? And the same thing in the case of a prusbul. There's no raise on the fact that the malva has no possession of the prusbul. He got rid of the prusbul because of sakana. It's therefore, says Reb Shimon Gamliel, Isha go b'ksubasa, even though she has a raise, so where's he get? Shalom again. Ubal chov go v'shalom b'prusbul, and the Baal Chov can collect the chov despite the reisa. Where's your prusbul? And that's misakana v'elef. And now we're up to the Gemara. So the Mishnah says that if she produces a get and she doesn't have a ksuba, based on the get, she can collect her ksuba. And the reason for this is because if, as he claims, he paid up the ksuba, one second. I see a note here. Just one second. Otzia get. They didn't ksuba go ksubasa. We did. This should go ksubasa. Right. So again, she collects a ksuba. We said why? Because he's not holding on to a shovar, and that's a race on his claim that he paid up the ksuba. Shmami, no, we see that kosvin shovar. And this is machlokes at the end of Baba Basra, in the case of a lover who admits that he owed money, and he wants to pay it up, and he demands of the malva that he give back the shtar, cough up the shtar and transfer it over to the lover. And the lover's claim is not accepted. Why? He cannot demand the payment of the shtar. Because kosvin shova, the malva could say, I don't have to give you back the shtar. Instead, I'm going to give you a note, a document of payment, and that will be your proof that you paid up the chov. And the lova does not have the legal right to say, I don't want a shovar. I don't want to have to hold on to a shovar and lock it up in a safe and make sure that the mice don't eat up my shovar. I'm always afraid that you'll produce the shtar against me and I won't have the shovar. And that claim is not accepted according to one man diomar at the end of Baba Basra, and the lover will not get back his shtar. All the lover will get is another shtar to counter the shtar in the hands of the malva, and that's called the shofar. And we're going to derive this from our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says the Baal is going to have to cough up the ksuba. And even though the Isha is holding on to the ksuba, meaning although his claim is that he paid up the ksuba, and yet she's holding on to the ksuba. If he paid up the ksuba, why didn't she get back the ksuba? Because like a lover who says, I want to get back the shtar millah from the malva when I pay up the chov, so to the Isha, when she collects her ksuba, she wants to get back. He wants to get back the ksuba. and yet she's got the upper hand, and we accept her claim that she wants to hold on to the ksuba. And why is that? How can we allow her to hold on to the ksuba if she's getting paid and she's collecting a ksuba? The only answer could be kosmin shover, the ain't kosmin shover. If you're going to argue from the position of the other mandiomer who says that the lova can absolutely demand as a condition in payment of the loan that he received the shtar milva from the hands of the malva, because ain't kosmin shover, then the Baal should be able to say, I'm not going to pay you the ksuba unless you return the ksuba to me. I want the shtar back. Because otherwise you have proof against me with the ksuba. Now, you might ask the following question. If we're holding ein kosvin shovar, and the Baal could therefore claim, I'm not going to pay up this ksuba unless you give me this chov of the ksuba, unless you give me back the shtar ksuba, because I don't have an option of getting a shovar to prove that I paid you the ksuba. Beis Din is going to have to rip up the get, right? If the get is here and she's holding on to the get, we're going to have to rip up the get and in the absence of a get, she will not be able to collect her ksuba if the Baal could demand that she return the ksuba before he pays her. So the Gemara says, "Lechish dilma mafkalo ksuba." So the gaviyaba. If you're not going to allow the Baal to make this condition, I'm not going to pay back the ksuba unless I get back the shtar ksuba. If all you're going to rely on is the fact that she's not holding on to the get, what happens after the Baal dies and she produces two Eidim to testify in court that her husband died, and now she's going to collect as an almana the ksuba, and she already collected the ksuba once before, you're going to have to say the kosmin shovar. The only possible way of avoiding this chashash, that after the death of the husband, she won't produce Eidim on the gerushin and claim her ksuba in a second Beis Din, could only be based on the fact that kosmin shovar. And that's why we prove from our Mishnah that kosmin shovar. And now Rav is going to reject this proof. Amar Rav, you have no proof from our Mishnah that kosmin shovar, because maybe the Mishnah is a makom she'ein kosmin ksuvas kinon, which means that a woman collects her ksuba based on T'nai Beis Din. Now, if I understand correctly, what Rav is arguing is that in this particular scenario of makom she'ein kosmin ksuba, we will write a shovar, but not because of kosmin shovar, but because there's no other option. There's no other way that we can allow her to collect a ksuba if she doesn't have a ksuba, because they don't write a ksuba. And if you're relying on T'nai Beis Din, then the Baal is going to be obligated to pay the ksuba, and she may go to another Beis Din and especially after his death and claim that she never got paid the ksuba. We're going to have to write a shovar. Shmuel Amar, but Shmuel holds the after makom shekosmin ksuba. There's no need to interpret the Mishnah as referring to a case of a makom she'ein kosmin ksuba, even in a makom shekosmin ksuba. So now the question is, if it's a place where they write the ksuba, then when the Baal pays the ksuba, then he's got to get back the ksuba. Otherwise, if we leave the ksuba in our hands, it's going to be real trouble for him. Lishmuel Kosman Shovar. But now we're going to have to assume that if it's a Makom Shekosman Ksuba, and she's holding on to the Ksuba, which means that the Baal cannot demand when he pays the Ksuba that he get back the Ksuba, then there's only one way of interpreting, and this halacha in a way that'll defend the position of the Baal. We're going to have to assume the Kosman Shovar. And here Rashi adds, and other Rishonim add, that Shmuel, as a matter of fact, at the end of Baba Basra, is of the opinion that ain't Kosman Shovar. So now we have a stira from Shmuel's interpretation of our Mishnah to Shmuel's sheet at the end of Baba Basra of Ein Kosman Shovar. Amar Rav Hanan would be Mefarshin Olaminei Devar Shmuel. And actually, Shmuel holds Ein Kosman Shovar, as we saw at the end of Baba Basra. The Mishnah here clearly holds that she can collect her ksuba and she doesn't have to return the ksuba. And now Rav Hanan introduces a mimonafsha. If it's a makom she'ein kosman, so there's no ksuba at all, and now the woman is coming without a ksuba because there is no ksuba to claim her ksuba. The Omer and the Baal writes kasavti. He says, I wrote you a ksuba, and I'm not going to pay up the ksuba unless you cough up and return the ksuba. So the answer is, since we're talking about a place of makom she'ein kosman ksuba, then the burden of proof is on his shoulders to prove that he deviated from the general accepted custom and he wrote her a ksuba. Olav Lavi Raya. Now let's go down the other path. The makom shekosman ksuba. And now the Baal says, I'm not going to pay you up unless you give me back the ksuba. The Omra, and the woman says, lo kosavli. I never got a ksuba. I want to collect my ksuba without a shtar. And the answer is, since the makom shenagu lichtov ksuba, therefore the burden of proof is on her shoulders to prove that she, in fact, never received the ksuba. Olel Lavi Raya, that her husband didn't give her a ksuba. The af Rav Hodarbe. I'm not sure what the word the af means. Well, I'm in good company. Anyway, Rav Hodarbe. Rav rescinded his original ruling that the Mishnah is talking about a case of Ein Kosman Ksuba. In other words, the af means that even Rav came to the conclusion that our Mishnah, like Shmuel interpreted it, is talking about a case of makom shekosman ksuba. The Omar Rav, bein b'makom shekosman, bein b'makom she'ein kosman, is get, if she has a get in her hands, gove ikar, she collects mana masayim, and that applies even in a makom shekosman ksuba. So it means that even with the get, in the absence of a ksuba, and even though it's a makom shekosman ksuba, nevertheless she can collect mana masayim. Ksuba, if on the other hand she does have a ksuba in her possession, then go with tosefes. Then if there were, even though she doesn't have a get, but if there are aidim to testify that he divorced her, she can collect the Tosefes. Again, this L'chor is only in the Surah, not in Arusa, but that's going to be the Sugya later on. So the Baal added to her Ksuba more than Mona Masayim that was established as Takonis Chacham. And in this case that she has a Ksuba in her hand, and the Ksuba testifies on a Tosefes Ksuba, she doesn't have a get in her possession. She can collect the Tosefes Ksuba based on the Shtar Ksuba. She cannot collect Mana Masayim, which is Ikar Ksuba, because she doesn't have a get. And if she doesn't have a get, then we suspect that maybe she already collected her Ikar Ksuba, and that's when Bezdin took away her get. Alternatively, we might be afraid that tomorrow she's going to collect the Ikar Ksuba. So now the Mishnah is talking about a case of even the Makom Shekosmin Ksuba. And with regard to collecting the Ikar Ksuba Mana Masayim, she can collect her Ksuba the get even without a Ksuba. And when the Baal comes and claims, I'm not going to pay up the Ksuba. And the reason for that is, why can't the Baal claim, I don't want to pay the Ksuba? And the answer is because even if she produces her Ksuba, we're not going to allow her to collect her Ksuba without a get. I'm talking about Ikar Ksuba. B'chol harotza lahashiv yovav yoshev. If anyone has a counter argument against this explanation of Rav in the Mishnah, then he can come forward, but we're not going to pay any attention. I mean, the Gemara is giving that stempel of approval. So now the Gemara is going to raise the following question on Rav. So now we learned in the Mishnah Ksuba that if she has a Ksuba to collect, she's holding on to the Ksuba get, even though she doesn't have a get. And he, Omer, she claims that not the way the Baal claims that when he paid up the Ksuba, the Bezdin ripped up the get, but rather Avad Giti, she lost her get. But who, Omer, the Baal says no, that Bezdin ripped up the get. And that's why you don't have a get. And then he turns to Bezdin and he says, write me a shofar so that she won't collect with this Shtar Ksuba after my death from my Yoshi. Now he's claiming that he already paid up the Ksuba, so where's the shofar? Avad Shovri, I lost my shofar, but I did in fact pay up the Ksuba. V'chein bal chov shotzi shtar chov edim o pruzbo. Hareu lo yiparu. Right, the law was timing that there was never a pruzbo, and there's a reza in the Tainus Hamalva in the fact that he claims he had a pruzbo. Where is it? The woman has a race against her because she's not holding on to a get. And if the Baal, as you claim, did not pay up the ksuba, why don't you have a get? And based on the race against the Malva, because he doesn't have a pruzbo, and against the Isha because she's not holding on to get, is lo yifru. Bishleim Shmuel. According to Shmuel, who explains that the reason why she collects without a ksuba, even in a makom shekosmi ksuba, is because we're talking about a case where she produces a proof that the Baal did not write her a ksuba. And that's how he's going to interpret the Sefer as well. That when she produces the ksuba and she doesn't have a get, she's not believed to claim her ksuba without a get. Mukila, the makom she'ein kosvin ksuba. The Omar and the Baal says kasavti. And according to Shmuel, the din is that he has to bring a proof that he wrote her a get, because the general minig is not to write a get. And the Baal is claiming that when she came to demand her ksuba based on a get, I claim that I wrote her a ksuba, I see raya. You're the exception to the rule. Prove that you in fact wrote her a ksuba. If you want to withhold payment of the ksuba because you're not getting back a get, prove that you wrote a get. It's a makom shein kosvin ksuba. Vilo maisi raya, amina le zil paret. And if you can't prove with the shovar, or you can't prove with Aiden that you wrote her a ksuba, then pay up the ksuba based on the fact that she's holding on to a get, which proves that she was divorced. And he's claiming that he did pay up the ksuba. And he's saying the reason why she doesn't have a get in her possession is because Bezin ripped up the get when he paid up the ksuba. And therefore the din is that even though she has a ksuba, she can't use that ksuba to force him to pay up. The reason for that is because it's a race against her. Where's your get? But again, we're talking about a makom shein kosvin ksuba, and the Baal deviated from the generally accepted minhag, and he wrote her a ksuba. And therefore the din is that he doesn't have to pay her without getting back the ksuba. And the Baal is claiming I wrote her a ksuba, and therefore I don't want to pay her back without a ksuba. But he didn't find a proof to establish that he wrote her a ksuba. So therefore, Bezdin is going to force him to pay up the ksuba based on the fact that she's holding on to the get. And then they're going to rip away the get from our hands. And now when she produces the ksuba, that is the ksuba that I claimed I wrote for her against the minig makom. And Bezdin did not initially accept my taina because I had no proof to establish I wrote the ksuba. But now that she produced a ksuba, then obviously I wrote her a ksuba. So this works out according to Shmuel. Again, let's just review it. According to Shmuel in the Reisha, the reason why she collects without a ksuba is because she produced a raya that she never received the ksuba. And now, according to Shmuel, in the Sefer, right, where she's not believed without a get to claim that she never received payment to the ksuba. And we're talking about a place where ain't kosvin ksuba. The Baal claims he wrote a ksuba. We're going to ask the Baal to bring a proof that he wrote her a ksuba. If he doesn't bring a proof, then we're going to force him to pay up. But if, on the other hand, she has a ksuba in her possession, that proves that he gave her a ksuba, and now he's tining that I didn't bring any proof l'chatchila to convince Bezdin that I wrote the ksuba, and therefore they decided to rip up the get from her possession, and therefore she's not believed to collect her ksuba. El Rav, according to Rav, why can she not collect the ksuba even without a get? Rav holds that a woman could collect monomasayim based on a get. If she has a ksuba, she can collect Tosefes ksuba. Now here in this case, she doesn't have a get, but she's holding on to a ksuba. And according to Rav, she should at least collect Tosefes ksuba. Nehide ikar lo gavya. So you're going to tell me that when the Mishnah says she cannot collect a ksuba with a ksuba in her hands, that's referring to one of a sayin, and that's the ikar ksuba. And the proof that she was already paid up, and therefore she cannot collect the ikar ksuba is the fact that she doesn't have a get. But Tosefes miyod tigre, according to Rav, once she produces the ksuba, she can collect Tosefes ksuba that's written in the get, in the ksuba. So why does the Mishnah say the stama without qualifying that she cannot collect a ksuba, which implies that she cannot collect neither one of a sayin nor Tosefes ksuba? Once she produces her ksuba, according to Rav, she should be able to collect her Tosefes ksuba. On Rav Yosef, he answers the question. The reason why she cannot collect the ksuba is because the Baal has a migu. And now we introduce the sugya migu. She doesn't have neither a get nor witnesses to testify that he gave her a get and he divorced her. It's therefore the Baal is believed to say, I paid you up the ksuba because he has a migu. Migu diyachal memar lo girashtiya. I never divorced her, and she doesn't have rights to collect the ksuba. Adayin lo igias man piron haksuba.